The starship Eclipse exploded in orbit above Havoc Prime, scattering debris like a mob firework display across the void. The last screams of its human crew crackled through the emergency comms, then silence. They killed an entire human delegation. Admiral Marcus Vor growled, slamming his fist against the reinforced table in Humanity's War Council chamber. His steely eyes swept across the room. This isn't just an attack, it's a declaration of war. The room was suffocatingly quiet for a moment, save for the low hum of holoscreens detailing the ambush. Humanity's leaders had long been underestimated, treated as upstart newcomers to the Galactic Assembly. But this was different. This was an insult they could not ignore. "It's the Grayan," said Captain Elena Cade, her voice tight. "They've been pushing our boundaries for years, but targeting a diplomatic mission? They've crossed the line." President Evelyn Jang leaned forward, her expression unreadable. "Cross the line, Captain? They just turned it into a grave." Her voice dropped to a deadly calm. "What evidence do we have?" Elena gestured, and a hologram flickered to life. It displayed a Grayan warship, the Zinther, firing on the unarmed Eclipse. The footage was clear, damning. The room erupted into a cacophony of voices. "They think we'll back down. They underestimate us again. This can't go unanswered." Jang raised a hand, silencing the room. "No, it cannot, but we will not rush into this blind. The galaxy has forgotten who we are, what we've endured. It's time we reminded them." The Grayan hegemony had grown bold since the last galactic conflict. The crystalline species, notorious for their arrogance, saw themselves as the Assembly's de facto rulers. But humanity had a knack for survival. Over centuries, they had faced extinction, from Earth's environmental collapse to hostile alien incursions, and had always emerged stronger. "They've calculated this move," Jang continued. "They believe we lack the resources to retaliate. They believe we're still the fractured species we were when we entered the Assembly. Let's show them their error." Cade hesitated. "Ma'am, if we retaliate, we risk a full-scale war. The Grayans have the VOR, the Ostal, even the Corran fleets. That's half the Assembly. We'll be outnumbered 20-1. And what do you suggest, captains?" Jang asked, her gaze unflinching. Elena took a deep breath. "We hit them where it hurts, hard and fast, before they can consolidate. We remind the galaxy that humanity doesn't start wars. We end them." A low murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Admiral Vorn nodded approvingly. Jang leaned back in her chair, the faintest trace of a smile playing on her lips. "Prepare the fleets. Humanity has stayed its hand for long enough. Let them come." Outside Earth's orbital defense grid lit up as fleets mobilized. Battle cruisers, destroyers, and stealth frigates emerged from the dark, ready for war. Across the colonies, factories shifted into overdrive, churning out weapons, armor, and AI combat drones. Humanity had faced annihilation before and survived. Now they would show the galaxy why. The Horizon's Edge breached the Grayan blockade around the neutral system of Zinus, emerging from subspace in a burst of blue light. The sleek human warship, bristling with experimental weapons, was escorted by a dozen smaller destroyers. For a moment, the Grayan fleet held its position, their crystalline hulls glittering like shards of ice. Then the first salvo erupted. "Captain Cade, enemy vessels are locking weapons," barked Lieutenant Jax Monroe from the tactical console. "Let them," Elena Cade replied coldly. She stood at the command deck, her gaze fixed on the tactical hologram. Grayan warships swarm like a swarm, elegant but predictable. "Hold fire until they're within optimal range. Let's remind them what happens when you provoke humanity." The Grayans fired first. Lances of violet energy streaked across the void, slamming into the human fleet's kinetic shields. The Horizon's Edge shuddered under the impact, but held firm. "Shields at 82%, Monroe reported. "They're testing us," Monroe said. "Let them test," Cade said. Her voice was calm, but her hands gripped the railing tightly. "Deploy the drones." Hundreds of autonomous combat drones launched from the human ships, moving like a swarm of angry hornets. Each drone was equipped with adaptive AI designed to exploit enemy weaknesses in real time. They weaved through the Grayan fleet, their small size and speed making them nearly impossible to target. "Drones engaging," said Monroe, watching the HUD screen as explosions erupted across the Grayan ships. "Enemy shields are failing on their forward line," added Ijan Myores. "Good target, the lead vessel," Cade ordered. "Focus fire." The Horizon's Edge unleashed its main cannon, a massive railgun that fired a tungsten slug at near-light speed. The projectile tore through the lead Grayan cruiser, shattering its crystalline hull into a million fragments. The wreckage spun out of control, colliding with two smaller escort ships and sending them spiraling into oblivion. "They're breaking formation," Monroe shouted. "Press the attack," Cade commanded. No mercy. The human fleet advanced, tearing through the Grayan ships with brutal efficiency. The drones targeted weak points, disabling engines and weapons systems, while the larger ships delivered devastating broadside attacks. "Message from the Vanguard," Torres said. "Admiral Vorn reports their fleet has neutralized the VUR reinforcements in Sector 14. They're moving to flank the Grayans." Kate allowed herself a grim smile. "Looks like the galaxy is learning what happens when you underestimate us." But the victory was short-lived. "Captain, multiple subspace signatures detected," Monroe yelled. "Reinforcements incoming." The holoscreen lit up with new contacts as a second Grayan fleet emerged from subspace. These ships were larger, more heavily armed, and flanked by VUR battle cruisers. "Evasive maneuvers," Cade shouted. "All ships, regroup and hold formation." The Grayan reinforcements wasted no time. Their ships fired in coordinated waves, overwhelming the human shields. 2 destroyers were obliterated in the first volley, their remains scattering across the battlefield. "They're targeting our rear flank," Torres called out. "We've got incoming. Deploy countermeasures," Cade ordered, "and get me a firing solution on their flagship." As the battle raged, Cade's mind raced. The Grayans had underestimated humanity before, but now they were throwing everything they had into this fight. Humanity's strength had always been its adaptability, its ability to turn the tide, even in the darkest moments. "Ma'am, the flagship is in range," Monroe said. "Fire the Nova cannon," Cade ordered. The Horizon's Edge powered up its most devastating weapon, a prototype energy cannon designed to overload enemy shields and obliterate even the toughest hulls. The ship shuddered as the cannon fired, releasing a blinding beam of white-hot energy. The Grayan flagship's shields flared brilliantly before collapsing. The beam struck the ship's core, triggering a catastrophic explosion that consumed several nearby vessels. "Direct hit," Torres shouted. The Grayan fleet hesitated, their movements faltering as their flagship disintegrated. "Push them back," Cade roared. "We've got them on the run." But just as victory seemed within reach, a chilling message crackled through the comms. "This is Regent Kale Venter of the Grayan hegemony," a deep, resonant voice announced. "You have proven yourselves formidable, humans. But your defiance ends here." The holoscreen displayed a massive Grayan dreadnought emerging from subspace. It dwarfed every other ship on the battlefield, its crystalline structure pulsing with an ominous red light. "Captain," Monroe said, his voice trembling, "that thing's power signature is off the charts. If it fires—" "It won't," Cade interrupted, her eyes burning with determination. "Not if we stop it first. Prepare the fleet for a full assault. We're not backing down." The human fleet rallied, their battered ships forming a tight formation. The dreadnought unleashed a devastating volley, its energy beams carving through the void like molten blades. But humanity fought back with everything they had, refusing to retreat. The battle was far from over, but one thing was clear. Humanity's resolve was unbreakable. The Horizon's Edge shook violently as another Grayan energy beam grazed its hull, sending arcs of blue lightning rippling across its shields. Elena Cade gripped the edge of her command console to steady herself as alarms blared around her. "Shields down to 32%, Lieutenant Monroe shouted. "We can't take another hit like that." Cade's mind raced. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and cornered, but surrender was not an option. "Divert all power to forward shields," she ordered. "Keep us moving. I want their dreadnought in our sights." "Captain, we won't last long if we stay in its line of fire," warned Enin Torres, her voice strained. "We won't last long if we run either," Cade snapped. "Humanity doesn't back down from bullies." The Horizon's Edge banked sharply, weaving between enemy fire as drones swarmed around it in a desperate bid to buy time. The Grayan dreadnought loomed in the distance, its massive crystalline hull glowing with a sinister red energy. "Ma'am, enemy fighters are flanking us," Monroe called out. "Release mines from the aft bays," Cade ordered. "Make them regret it." Behind them, a series of small explosions erupted as the mines detonated, shredding the pursuing Grayan fighters. It was a small victory, but it barely tipped the scales. "Admiral Vorn is hailing us," Torres announced. "Put him through," Cade said. The grizzled face of Admiral Marcus Vorn appeared on the comms display, his expression grim. "Captain Cade, My fleet is pinned down on the far side of the battlefield. We can't reach you in time. Cade nodded, her jaw tight. Understand, Admiral. We'll hold the line. You don't have to do this alone, Elena Torres said, his voice softening. There's no shame in a tactical withdrawal. With all due respect, Admiral, Cade replied, you know that's not an option. If we run, they'll chase us all the way to Earth. We end this here. Vorn hesitated, then nodded. Good luck, Captain. Vorn out. As the transmission ended, Cade turned to her crew. This is it. All or nothing. We take down that dreadnought, or we don't go home. Everyone ready. A chorus of affirmations echoed through the bridge. Good, Cade said. Bring us in close and prepare the Nova cannon. The Horizon's Edge surged forward, its engines burning at maximum thrust. The Grayan dreadnought loomed closer with every passing second, its weapons glowing ominously. Captain, their main weapon is charging. Monroe shouted. Evasive maneuvers. Cade barked. The dreadnought fired, unleashing a massive energy beam that carved through space. The Horizon's Edge twisted sharply, the beam narrowly missing its hull. Damage report, Cade demanded. No significant hits, Torres said, but we can't dodge forever. We won't have to, Cade replied. How long until the Nova cannon is ready? 40 seconds, Monroe said. We don't have 40 seconds, Cade muttered as the dreadnought's weapons fired again, this time hitting one of the human escort ships. The smaller vessel exploded in a brilliant flash, taking dozens of drones with it. They're targeting our support ships, Torres said. They want to isolate us, Cade said. But they won't get the chance. All remaining ships, focus fire on the dreadnought's forward shields. Give me a clear shot. The human fleet rallied, unleashing a barrage of missiles and railgun slugs at the dreadnought. The Grayan ship's shields flared brightly, absorbing the onslaught, but cracks began to appear in the crystalline barrier. Shields at 20%, Monroe reported. We're almost through. Keep firing, Cade ordered. The dreadnought retaliated, its weapons cutting through the human fleet with ruthless precision. Another destroyer fell, then a frigate, but the humans pressed on, their resolve unshaken. Nova cannon is ready, Monroe announced. Target their core and fire, Cade said. The Horizon's Edge unleashed its most powerful weapon. A blinding beam of energy surged forward, slamming into the dreadnought's weakened shields. The barrier shattered, and the beam struck the ship's crystalline core. For a moment, there was silence. Then the dreadnought exploded in a massive burst of red light, fragments of its hull scattering across the void. Direct hit, Torres shouted. Cheers erupted across the bridge, but Cade wasn't smiling. Don't celebrate yet, she said. We've still got their fleet to deal with. The destruction of the dreadnought sent shockwaves through the Grayan fleet. Their ships hesitated, their formations breaking as confusion set in. They're retreating, Monroe said, disbelief in his voice. They know they've lost, Cade said. The Grayan ships began to withdraw, their once-coordinated assault crumbling into disarray. The human fleet pursued them briefly, but Cade held them back. Let them run, she said. We've made our point. As the battlefield fell silent, the Horizon's Edge drifted amidst the wreckage. The cost of victory was high, but humanity had proven its strength once again. The Grayan Regent's chamber was deathly quiet, save for the faint hum of the holocom displaying the aftermath of the battle. Fragments of Grayan and human ships drifted like scattered ashes over Zinus, the wreckage of the dreadnought glowing faintly in the void. Cale Vintar's crystalline hands trembled as he gripped the edge of his ornate command table. This wasn't supposed to happen, Vintar whispered, his voice a jagged rasp. Humans are primitives, fractured, weak. No longer came a low voice from the shadows. From the outer corridor came the sound of heavy mechanical footfalls.